They say lawyers are trained to smell blood in the water. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the blood is your own. I was sitting in Marcus Chen's corner office on the 42nd floor when he asked me to do something I'd never done before. Not in 12 years of practicing law, not in 5 years as general counsel of Apex Dynamics. He asked me to lie. The city stretched below us like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Rain painted the windows in slow streaks, distorting the lights until Manhattan looked like an impressionist's fever dream. Marcus stood with his back to me, hands in his pockets, watching the storm the way some men watch sports. Like he was keeping score. Sarah? My name sounded different in his mouth that night. Careful, weighted. I need you to understand something. I understood plenty. I understood that the SEC had questions about our Q3 filings. I understood that our CFO had resigned 2 weeks earlier with a severance package that could choke a horse. I understood that Marcus had been taking calls behind closed doors, his assistant suddenly requiring NDAs for calendar access. What I didn't understand was why he'd called me in at 9:30 on a Friday night after everyone else had gone home. Why his office smelled like scotch and desperation. Why his reflection in the rain-streaked glass looked older than it had that morning. The board wants a narrative, he said. Narrative. Corporate speak for a beautiful lie. Something clean, something that protects the company. I set down my coffee. It had gone cold an hour ago, but I'd kept holding it anyway. Holding it like proof that this was just another late night, just another fire to put out. Holding it like armor. What kind of narrative? He turned then. Marcus was handsome in the way powerful men often are, not because of his features, but because of what lived behind them. Certainty. Control. The bone-deep belief that the world bent for men like him because it always had. The kind where you take responsibility for the accounting irregularities. The words landed soft, surgical. Like a blade you don't feel until you see the blood. I laughed. Actually laughed. It came out wrong, sharp-edged and bitter. You're joking. I'm giving you an opportunity. He moved closer, perched on the edge of his desk, close enough that I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and ambition. We issue a statement. You made an error in judgment regarding the Delaware subsidiary disclosures. You resign, we give you 18 months severance, excellent references, and you land somewhere better within 6 months. Everyone wins. Except I didn't make an error. No. He smiled then, small, sad, almost apologetic. You didn't. The rain intensified. Somewhere 42 floors below, people were running for cabs, holding briefcases over their heads, laughing at the suddenness of it, living small, honest lives where the worst thing that happened was wet shoes and ruined hair. I envied them. The irregularities, I said slowly. The shell company rooting. The revenue recognition games. That was you. That was business. He said it like explaining gravity to a child. Inevitable. Natural. Companies do it every day, Sarah. We just got unlucky. Someone at the SEC decided to actually read the footnotes. Someone should. Maybe. He stood, poured himself 2 fingers of scotch from the crystal decanter on his credenza. Didn't offer me any. But here's what matters now. The company survives, or it doesn't. 2,000 employees keep their jobs, or they don't. And you decide which story gets told. I should have left then. Should have walked straight to my office, called the SEC hotline, and let the whole rotting structure collapse. Should have chosen the law over the man. But Marcus was right about one thing. I'd been trained to see blood in the water, and I just realized there was more than I'd thought. Much more. I need to review the full accounting work papers, I said. Everything from the Delaware sub, all correspondence with external auditors. And I want access to your personal email regarding the transactions. His hand paused halfway to his mouth, glass catching light. Why? Because if I'm going to apologize for something I didn't do, I need to understand exactly what I'm apologizing for. He drank, slow, savoring it like victory. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Most people are, Marcus. He laughed at that. Real laughter, warm and genuine. The kind that made you remember why you'd liked him once. Why everyone did. Why the board had made him CEO at 39, the youngest in company history. Why I'd taken this job instead of the partnership offer at Kirkland & Ellis. Monday, he said. I'll have everything sent to you Monday. I stood, smoothed my skirt, picked up my bag and my cold coffee. At the door, I stopped. Marcus, one question. Anything. If I say no, if I don't take this deal, what happens? The smile faded, slowly, like sun slipping behind clouds. Then the board's external counsel will conduct an investigation. They'll find that the general counsel had signature authority on the subsidiary transactions. They'll find her fingerprints on the documents. They'll recommend her termination for cause, no severance, and probable referral to the New York Bar Disciplinary Committee. I see. Do you? He set down his glass. Because I'm trying to help you, Sarah. I'm trying to let you leave with your dignity intact. I nodded. Once. Then I walked out into the empty hallway with its recessed lighting and abstract art and the profound silence of a building at night. The elevator took 90 seconds to arrive. 90 seconds of standing alone in that corporate corridor, watching my reflection in the polished steel doors. She looked tired, that woman. She looked like she'd been swimming in deep water for a very long time and had just realized she couldn't see the shore anymore. The doors opened. I stepped inside. And as they closed, shutting out the 42nd floor and Marcus Chen in his beautiful corner office, I felt something shift. Not fear, not anger, clarity, because I'd spent 12 years learning how to read people, how to spot the lie beneath the truth, how to find the crack in the story. And Marcus had just told me everything I needed to know. He was scared, desperately, profoundly scared, which meant the blood in the water wasn't mine. It was his. Act 2. The seduction. Monday arrived wrapped in fog, the kind of morning where the city disappears at the 25th floor, where you work in the clouds and pretend you're not worried about falling. I got to the office at 6, not because I wanted to, because I'd stopped sleeping. My assistant wasn't in yet. No one was. Just me and the cleaning crew and the hum of servers in the data center 3 floors down, processing the weekend's trades, indifferent to human drama. I made coffee in the executive kitchen. Real coffee, not the pod nonsense. Ground beans and a French press I kept in the cabinet behind the organic tea no one ever drank. The ritual steadied me. The smell, the heat, the simple arithmetic of water and time. My office was exactly as I'd left it Friday. Exactly as it had been for 5 years. Diplomas on the wall, Columbia, Yale Law, photos from closings and transactions, handshakes with men in suits, everyone smiling like we just saved the world instead of shuffling money between entities. A small sculpture my daughter made in 3rd grade, before she got too old for that kind of thing. Before she started noticing that mommy worked late and missed recitals and brought the smell of stress home like perfume. I set down the coffee, opened my laptop, found the email from Marcus's assistant, time-stamped 2:14 a.m. Subject line, per MC request, confidential. 3 attachments, combined size, 42 megabytes. I clicked the first one. Work papers, accounting schedules, revenue recognition analyses for Apex Delaware Holdings, LLC, our wholly owned subsidiary that existed primarily on paper and in the imaginations of tax attorneys. The numbers looked clean, tight, professional, exactly the kind of work that passes muster in audit reviews because everything's technically correct, technically defensible, technically legal, technically. But I'd done securities work before GC Life, back when I was an associate, billing 2,300 hours a year and sleeping under my desk. I knew the tricks, the elegant ways to make revenue appear in quarters it hadn't been earned, the timing games, the SPE structures that were perfectly legal until they weren't. And this was artful, genuinely artful. Apex Delaware was booking revenue from contracts that were real but incomplete, recognizing income from customers who'd signed agreements but hadn't taken delivery, creating invoices for services. That would be rendered technically eventually, but not in the quarter where we'd booked the revenue, $23 million across Q2 and Q3, enough to beat analyst estimates both quarters, enough to keep the stock price inflated, enough to make Marcus's performance bonus north of $4 million. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to be fraud. I opened the second attachment, external auditor correspondence, back and forth between our audit committee and Graves Whitfield LLP, one of the big 4 firms that supposedly kept companies honest. The partner's name was David Rothstein. I'd met him twice. Late 50s, silver hair, the kind of handshake that lasted exactly 3 seconds. Professional, careful. The kind of man who'd built a career on knowing which questions not to ask. His emails were masterpieces of careful language, based on management representations, subject to additional procedures, appears consistent with applicable standards. Every sentence had an escape hatch. Every conclusion was qualified. Every opinion came wrapped in protective layers of conditional language that would hold up beautifully when the shit hit the fan and lawyers started assigning blame. He'd known. Maybe not the details, but the shape of it. He'd smelled the blood and looked the other way because that's what you do when you're billing $8 million a year in audit fees and don't want to lose the account. I took a breath, drank coffee, felt it burn all the way down. The third file was the one that mattered, Marcus's personal emails. He'd been sloppy, or desperate, or both. The correspondence went back 6 months. Him and Dennis Howell, our now departed CFO, planning it, choreographing it, deciding which contracts to accelerate, which customers to push, which disclosure footnotes to bury in complexity. One email made me stop breathing. From Marcus Chen to Dennis Howell. Date April 18, 2024. Delaware structure. Dennis. We need Sarah to sign off on the subsidiary formation, docs, and the revenue recognition memo. Keep it technical, emphasize the GAAP compliance angle. She's good, but she's not an accountant. She'll trust our judgment on the numbers. Once her signature is on the documents, we have cover if anyone asks questions. General counsel reviewed and approved. That's what boards want to hear. I read it 3 times, then I read it again. He'd planned it, from the beginning, using me as insurance, getting my signature on formations documents and compliance memos that looked routine, that were routine, until you understood what they were really for, making me complicit without my knowledge, making me the lifeboat he could push into the water when the ship started sinking. My hands were shaking. I set down the coffee before I could spill it, pressed my palms flat against the desk, felt the cool glass surface, counted to 10 in my head, like my therapist taught me. When I opened my eyes, the sun was starting to break through the fog. Not much, just enough to turn the gray world golden at the edges. My phone buzzed, text from Marcus. Morning, breakfast at 8, need to discuss the statement draft. I stared at it, thought about what he'd said in his office, the narrative, the apology, the dignified exit. I texted back. Sounds good. Conference room, B. Perfect, bring your appetite. I smiled at that. Couldn't help it, because Marcus had no idea what I was hungry for. The next 3 hours were a masterclass in preparation. I'd learned something in law school that most people forget. The case isn't won in court, it's won in discovery, in the documents, in knowing the story before the other side realizes there's a story to tell. I downloaded everything to an encrypted drive, forwarded copies to my personal email through a VPN, routing through servers in 3 countries because paranoia is just preparation wearing uncomfortable shoes. Called our outside securities counsel, not the firm Marcus used, but the one I'd used for a separate subsidiary transaction 2 years ago. Left a voicemail asking for a confidential consultation. Attorney-client privilege, urgent. Then I did something I'd never done before. I called the SEC's whistleblower office. Not to report, not yet. Just to understand the process, the protections, the rewards. The woman who answered had a kind voice, Midwestern, patient. She explained it like she was teaching Sunday school. Dodd-Frank provisions, anti-retaliation protections, 10 to 30% of monetary sanctions recovered. In cases involving accounting fraud, she said, if the commission recovers over $1 million in sanctions, the whistleblower award can be substantial. How substantial? I can't comment on specific amounts, but I can tell you we take these cases very seriously, especially when we have strong documentary evidence. I thanked her, hung up, sat in my office while the city woke up outside and people started arriving, voices in the hallway, the coffee machine in the kitchen whirring to life. At 7:55, I gathered my laptop and my documents and my encrypted drive. At 7:58, I walked to conference room B. Marcus was already there, coffee waiting for me, cream, no sugar, exactly how I liked it. Pastries from that place in Tribeca he always used for important meetings, croissants and pain au chocolat arranged on the good china. He smiled when I walked in, warm, genuine, like we were friends. We'd been friends once. 4 years ago, when he was COO and I was just senior counsel, we'd worked together on the merger that doubled the company's size. Long nights reviewing contracts, ordering Thai food at midnight, laughing about the absurdity of it all. He'd told me about his divorce. I'd told him about my daughter's learning disability. Real things, true things. That's how betrayal works. It requires intimacy first. Sarah. He gestured to the chair across from him. Thanks for coming. I sat, accepted the coffee, didn't touch the pastries. I've been thinking about our conversation, I said, and I need you to be completely honest with me. How bad is it really? He leaned back, considered me. Outside, fog still clung to the buildings, turning the world soft and uncertain. "It's manageable," he said finally, "if we control the narrative. But if we don't, then it becomes criminal." He said it simply, like discussing the weather. Securities fraud, possibly conspiracy. The company survives, probably, but there are personal consequences for whoever the evidence points to, which is currently me, which is currently both of us. He leaned forward. "That's why I'm offering you the exit, Sarah. Take the deal, leave clean. Let me handle the rest." "How will you handle it?" "I'll find another narrative, one that doesn't involve you." "There isn't one." His smile was sad, almost pitying. "There's always a narrative. You just have to know how to tell it." I drank my coffee. It was perfect. He'd remembered exactly how I liked it. 5 years of working together, of morning meetings and late nights and the small intimacies of professional partnership. All of it calculation. All of it preparation for this moment. "I need time," I said. "How much time?" "A week. Let me think about it. Let me talk to my family." He studied me, looking for cracks, for leverage, for the weakness he could exploit. But I'd spent the weekend learning his playbook, and I'd learned something important. Men like Marcus believe they are the smartest person in the room, because usually they are. They believe their charm is a weapon, because usually it is. They believe women like me will blink first, because usually we do. Usually. "1 week," he said. "But Sarah, don't make me regret giving you time." I stood, gathered my things. At the door I turned back. "Marcus, that CFO who resigned, Dennis, where is he now?" "Singapore. Took a position with a sovereign wealth fund. Why?" "Just curious." I walked out, left the pastries untouched, left the coffee half finished, left Marcus Chen sitting in that conference room thinking he'd won. The elevator doors closed on his floor. I rode down alone, watching the numbers descend. 42, 41, 40. Each floor a layer stripped away, each number a step closer to ground level, to the street, to the world where the law still meant something. My phone buzzed, text from my outside counsel. "Got your voicemail, can meet Wednesday." "This about what I think it's about?" I typed back. "Yes, bring your securities fraud expertise. We're going to need it." Act 3. The Unraveling. Wednesday arrived cold, October sharp, the kind of morning where Manhattan smells like roasted coffee and coming consequences. I took the subway to Brooklyn, not a car, not a lift where drivers remember faces and apps record destinations. The F train at rush hour, packed, with people living honest lives where no one cared who I was or what I was carrying in my locked briefcase. The cafe was in Park Slope, the kind of place that served pour-over coffee and had mismatched furniture from estate sales. Writers working on laptops, young mothers with strollers. The comfortable anonymity of a neighborhood that wasn't trying to impress anyone. Richard Walsh was already there when I arrived. Corner table, back to the wall, positioned where he could see both entrances. Old habits from his prosecutor days, when witnesses sometimes didn't make it to court. He was 63, white hair still thick. Cheap suit that had been expensive 30 years ago, when he was putting CEOs in prison and collecting commendations from the Justice Department. Former SEC enforcement attorney who'd gone into private practice after making his career putting bad men in good prisons. 26 years in government service. Built a reputation for being incorruptible in a city where everything has a price. He'd also been married 3 times, which probably wasn't unrelated. He ordered black coffee. I ordered tea I wouldn't drink. We sat there while the cafe hummed around us, 2 lawyers discussing the systematic destruction of a man's career, speaking quietly like we were planning a surprise party instead of a takedown. Richard listened while I talked. I talked for 40 minutes, showed him everything on my laptop, screen angled away from the other customers, the emails, the accounting schedules, the revenue recognition games, the careful way Marcus had gotten my signature on documents that looked routine until you understood their purpose. When I finished, Richard sat back, drank his coffee, looked at me with eyes that had seen this story before. Same words, different faces. "You're in trouble," he said. "I know?" "No." He leaned forward. "You don't. Because here's what happens. The SEC investigates, they find your signature on the key documents, and unless you can prove you didn't know what you were signing, you're looking at career death. Bar suspension at minimum, possible criminal referral. I have the emails showing Marcus intended to use me as cover, which prove he's smart and you're negligent." He said it flat, kind but honest. General counsel doesn't get to claim ignorance. That's literally your job, to know. The coffee tasted like ash. I set it down. So, what do I do? You have 3 options. He counted them on his fingers. Blunt, practical. 1. Take Marcus's deal. Resign, sign the NDA, disappear. You lose your career but avoid criminal exposure. 2. Report to the SEC as a whistleblower. Full cooperation, turn over everything. Pray they see you as a witness instead of a target. 3. Fight. Fight how? Richard smiled then. Thin, sharp. The smile of a man who'd spent decades watching powerful people underestimate the power of paper trails. You're a lawyer, Sarah. You know how to build a case. You know what evidence means. So you ask yourself, what does Marcus need most right now? The board's confidence. Wrong. He tapped the table. He needs the board's ignorance. The moment they know the real story, he's done. So you don't report to the SEC yet. You don't resign. You document everything. You secure your evidence, and you make sure that when the bomb goes off, you're not standing next to it. You're saying I should let the company implode. I'm saying you should make sure the right person implodes. He finished his coffee. Marcus set you up to take the fall, so you make sure the trap springs on him instead. We talked for another hour. Strategy, timeline, what I needed to do, what I absolutely couldn't do. By the time we left that cafe, I had a plan. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't clean, but it was mine. The next 2 days were surgical. I went to the office, smiled at Marcus in the hallway, attended meetings about Q4 projections and the holiday party budget, played my part, and every night I worked. I documented everything, created a timeline of every meeting, every email, every conversation where Marcus had steered decisions toward the fraud. I pulled my own emails showing when I'd asked questions, raised concerns, requested auditor consultations, proving I'd done my job, proving I'd trusted the people I was supposed to trust. I called Dennis Howell in Singapore. 3 a.m. my time, his afternoon. He answered on the 5th ring, voice wary. Sarah, this is unexpected. I need to know what you told the board when you resigned. Silence, long enough that I could hear traffic in the background. The sound of his new life, his safe life, his severance package buying silence. I told them I wanted to spend more time with my family. And they believed you? They wanted to believe me. He sighed. Look, Sarah, I'm sorry about what's happening, but I'm out. I got out clean. You should too. Marcus is setting me up to take your place. I know. 2 words, flat, honest. He'd known, and he'd left anyway because that's what survival looks like sometimes. That's what happens when you're tired of being brave. Help me, I said. Testify about his role in the fraud. Tell the truth. I signed an NDA. If I breach it, I lose the severance. If I go down for this, you're next. The SEC doesn't stop at 1 scalp. He laughed, bitter. You think they'll find me in Singapore? You think they care? I think the truth matters. The truth? His voice went hard. The truth is that men like Marcus don't fall. They float. They always float. And people like us? We're ballast. We get thrown overboard to keep the ship from sinking. He hung up. I sat in my apartment, lights off, city glowing outside. My daughter was at her father's for the week. The silence felt complete. Richard was right. I was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind that ends careers and makes you explain to your daughter why mommy can't practice law anymore, why we had to sell the apartment, why everything changed, unless I changed the story first. Friday morning, I requested a meeting with the board's audit committee, told Marcus's assistant it was routine, quarterly legal update, nothing urgent. She put me on the calendar for Monday afternoon, 2 p.m., conference room A, the full committee, 3 outside directors, retired executives from other companies, the kind of people who got board seats because they knew how to ask the right questions, or not ask them at all. Marcus caught me in the hallway Friday afternoon. Casual, friendly, his hand on my shoulder, the gesture of a colleague, a mentor, a friend. Sarah, how are you holding up? Fine, busy with year-end planning. Good, good. He smiled. Listen, about our conversation, the offer, have you thought about it? Every day. And? I met his eyes, held them. Let him see what he wanted to see. Uncertainty, fear, weakness. I think you might be right, I said. About the narrative, about leaving clean. His grip on my shoulder tightened. Relief, victory. I'm glad. We'll work out the details next week. Something dignified. Of course. He walked away, confident, certain. A man who'd won and knew it. I watched him go. Watched him turn the corner, disappear into his corner office with its view of the city and its crystal decanters and its profound delusion that power meant safety. Then I went to my office, locked the door, called Richard Walsh. "I'm ready," I said. "Monday?" "Monday." "Are you sure? Because once you do this, there's no going back." I looked at the photo on my desk. My daughter, age 8, holding up the sculpture she'd made, proud, innocent, believing her mother was someone worth believing in. "I'm sure." That weekend, I didn't sleep, didn't eat much, sat in my apartment building a presentation while the city moved below me, people living their simple lives with their simple problems, unaware that 42 floors above them, someone was preparing to burn down a kingdom. Sunday night, I printed everything, bound it, created a board book that would have made my law school professor proud, clean, professional, devastating. Monday morning, I wore my best suit, navy, expensive, the armor of professional women everywhere. I got to the office at 7, made coffee, sat in my office while the city woke up and people arrived and the machine of corporate life hummed to life one more time. At 1:55 p.m., I gathered my materials, my laptop, my bound presentation, my encrypted drive with copies of everything, because the first rule of evidence is redundancy. At 2 p.m., I walked into conference room A. The audit committee was already seated. 3 men, late 60s, expensive suits, faces that had presided over countless boards, countless crises, countless moments where they had to decide what mattered more, truth or convenience. Marcus was there too, sitting at the head of the table, his meeting, his confidence absolute, until he saw my presentation materials, until he saw the thickness of the binder, until he saw the title page, Accounting Irregularities, a review by the Office of General Counsel. His face didn't change, but his hand, reaching for his water glass, hesitated. Just for a moment, just enough. I smiled at him, small, sad, almost apologetic. Then I began to speak. AC 4, The Reckoning, Gentlemen. I placed the binders in front of each committee member, heavy, substantial, the weight of evidence made physical. Thank you for making time for this presentation. What I'm about to share with you requires immediate attention and, I believe, immediate action. The chairman, Robert Sutherland, opened his binder. 71 years old, former CEO of a Fortune 100 manufacturer, the kind of man who'd survived 3 recessions and a hostile takeover attempt. Silver hair, perfect posture, hands that didn't shake. He'd been on 17 boards over his career, seen every kind of crisis, financial, reputational, criminal. He glanced at the first page, then at Marcus, then back at me. His face revealed nothing, which itself revealed everything. This was serious. "Sarah, I was under the impression this was a routine quarterly update." It was, until it wasn't. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the picture of calm, his fingers laced together, resting on the table, the body language of a man completely at ease. "Robert, I'm sure whatever Sarah's concerned about can be addressed through normal channels. There's no need to alarm the committee." Normal channels, the phrase executives use when they mean, let's handle this quietly, when they mean, let's make this go away before anyone important finds out. I disagree. I kept my voice level, professional, the tone I'd perfected over 12 years of delivering bad news to powerful men who didn't want to hear it, calm but firm, respectful but unwavering. Over the past 6 months, Apex Dynamics has engaged in systematic revenue recognition fraud involving our Delaware subsidiary. The fraud has inflated our reported revenue by approximately $23 million across 2 quarters. And the current plan, as articulated by our CEO, is to have me take responsibility for these irregularities as part of a coordinated cover-up. Silence. Complete silence. Not the comfortable silence of people thinking, the sharp silence of shock, of futures recalculating, of carefully constructed realities fracturing, the kind of silence that precedes thunder. Robert looked at Marcus. Really looked at him. The way you look at someone when you're trying to see if they're still the person you thought they were. "Is this true?" "Absolutely not." Marcus smiled, patient, a man being wrongly accused, a man who'd explain the misunderstanding and everything would return to normal. "Sarah, I understand you're under stress. The SEC inquiry has been difficult for all of us. But making baseless accusations. They're not baseless." I turned to page 3 of the presentation. I have emails from Mr. Chen to our former CFO, Dennis Howell, explicitly discussing the revenue recognition scheme. I have accounting work papers showing contracts being booked before delivery. I have correspondence with our external auditors demonstrating a pattern of misleading representations about timing and completion. And I have documented evidence that Mr. Chen deliberately obtained my signature on formation documents to provide legal cover for his fraud. I walked them through it, page by page, email by email, number by number. 12 years of legal training distilled into 40 minutes of surgical precision. The April email where Marcus told Dennis to keep it technical so I wouldn't understand what I was approving. The June conversation where they discussed which analyst questions to manage carefully about Delaware sub-revenue. The August decision to push Dennis out with generous severance and confidentiality agreements before the SEC investigation got serious. The October meeting where Marcus offered me the same deal: resign, take the severance, become the scapegoat. When I finished, the room felt smaller, colder, like all the air had been replaced with something heavier. Robert closed his binder. His hand trembled slightly, just slightly. "Marcus, this is a betrayal." Marcus stood, not angry, hurt, wounded. "Sarah, I brought you into my confidence. I tried to help you navigate a difficult situation, and you've twisted it into something ugly. I've told the truth. You've told your version." He turned to the committee. "Here's mine. Our CFO made aggressive accounting decisions. Sarah, as general counsel, signed off on the legal structure. When the SEC started asking questions, I tried to find a solution that protected the company and gave Sarah a graceful exit. Instead, she's created this narrative to avoid accountability. It was beautiful. Truly beautiful. The wounded CEO, the ungrateful counsel, the tragic misunderstanding. If I hadn't spent the last week preparing for exactly this response, I might have doubted myself. "Then you won't mind if we bring in external forensic accountants," I said, "and securities counsel who aren't conflicted, and you won't object to preserving all documents and communications related to the Delaware subsidiary." His jaw tightened. "I have nothing to hide." "Excellent," I turned to Robert. "I recommend the committee immediately engage independent counsel and suspend Mr. Chen pending a complete investigation. I also recommend we self-report to the SEC before they discover the fraud through their own investigation. Cooperation reduces sanctions significantly." "You're talking about destroying this company," Marcus said. His voice had changed, harder now, the charm stripped away like paint peeling off walls. 2,000 employees, shareholder value, everything we've built. "I'm talking about saving it." I met his eyes. "The fraud destroys the company. The truth just forces us to face what you've already done." Robert looked at the other committee members. Some silent conversation passed between them. The language of men who'd been in rooms like this before, who understood that crisis has its own grammar. "We need to caucus," Robert said. "Sarah, Marcus, please step out." We walked into the hallway together, stood there in silence, 15 feet apart. While inside that conference room, 3 old men decided our futures. Marcus checked his phone, scrolled through emails, the picture of unconcern. But his hand was tight on the device, knuckles white. "You'll never work again," he said quietly. "You understand that? You just committed professional suicide." "Maybe. Definitely." He looked up. "I have friends, Sarah, on every board in this city. One call from me, you're radioactive, unemployable, the lawyer who destroyed her own company. Is that a threat? It's a fact." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, sandalwood and rage. "You think truth matters? It doesn't. Power matters. And I have more of it than you'll ever understand." The door opened. Robert stood there, face carefully neutral. "We'd like you both back inside." We filed in, sat down. The presentation binders were stacked neatly in the center of the table. The room smelled like paper and consequence. "The committee has voted unanimously to suspend Marcus Chen from his position as CEO, effective immediately, pending an independent investigation." Robert's voice was steady, practiced, the voice of a man delivering verdicts. "We're engaging outside counsel and forensic accountants. All relevant documents will be preserved. Sarah, we'd like you to remain as general counsel and cooperate fully with the investigation." Marcus stood. "You're making a mistake." "Perhaps." Robert handed him a folder. "This contains the terms of your suspension. You'll maintain your salary pending investigation outcome, but you're barred from company premises and prohibited from contacting employees or board members except through counsel." 20 years. Marcus's voice cracked, just slightly. "I built this company, took it from 70 million to 800 million, and you're throwing me out based on the word of someone trying to save herself." "We're following the evidence," Robert said. "If Sarah's wrong, the investigation will show that. But if she's right, then you've put this entire organization at risk. Either way, we need to know the truth." Marcus looked at me, really looked at me. And for a moment, I saw past the charm and the anger to something smaller, something broken. Fear. Pure fear. The kind that comes when you realize the story you've been telling yourself is over. He picked up the folder, walked to the door, stopped. "Sarah, that sculpture on your desk, the one your daughter made, it's crooked, always has been." Then he left. The door closed behind him. The room exhaled. "Sarah," Robert's voice was gentle now, tired. "You understand what comes next? The investigation, the SEC, the media coverage. This is going to be ugly. I know. Why did you do it? You could have taken his offer, left quietly, started over." I thought about that, about the easy path, the one where I signed the papers and collected the severance and taught my daughter that sometimes lying is the same as surviving. "Because she's watching," I said. "Who?" "My daughter. She's watching what I do, what I choose, what I'm willing to tolerate." I gathered my materials, and I needed her to see that some things matter more than convenience. Robert nodded, once, the gesture of a man who'd made hard choices himself. "We'll need you available for the investigation, full cooperation." "Of course. And Sarah, thank you for your courage." I almost laughed at that. Courage. Like I'd done something noble instead of just refusing to drown quietly while someone else held me underwater. But I just nodded, said thank you. Walked out into the hallway. It was 4:30. The afternoon light was slanting through the windows, turning the office golden. People were still working, unaware that the company had just imploded in conference room A, unaware that their CEO was gone, unaware that everything was about to change. I went to my office, locked the door, sat in my chair, and stared at the sculpture my daughter had made. Marcus was right. It was crooked, always had been. I'd just never had time to fix it. My phone buzzed. Text from Richard Walsh. "How did it go?" I typed back. "We're still standing. Barely. That's all that matters. Call me tomorrow. We have work to do." I set down the phone, looked out at the city, at Manhattan in October, beautiful and brutal and indifferent to human drama. Somewhere out there, Marcus Chen was packing his office, calling his lawyers, planning his next move. Somewhere out there, the SEC was receiving our self-report, opening their files, sharpening their teeth. And somewhere, in a school in Brooklyn, my daughter was sitting in class, learning about the Revolutionary War, or long division, or whatever fourth graders learn. Learning that the world has rules, that truth matters, that courage is sometimes just being too tired to lie anymore. I hoped she'd never have to learn the way I did, but I was glad I could show her it was possible. ACT 5, The Fade. The investigation took 4 months. 4 months of depositions and document reviews and lawyers asking the same questions 12 different ways, looking for cracks in the story. Winter turned to spring while we dissected the past. Conference rooms that smelled like recycled air and desperation. Federal prosecutors with their careful questions and their wireless glasses of water. SEC attorneys who'd seen every variation of corporate fraud and weren't impressed by originality. They didn't find any cracks, because it wasn't a story. It was just what happened. The forensic accountants, brought in from one of those firms that specializes in finding money hidden in plain sight, spent 6 weeks building a timeline. Every transaction, every email, every moment where Marcus and Dennis had chosen deception over disclosure. $23 million. That was the number. Exactly $23,472,000 in fraudulent revenue recognition across 2 quarters. Enough to beat analyst estimates by 3 cents per share in Q2, 4 cents in Q3. Enough to keep the stock price inflated through the summer while Marcus sold 200,000 shares. Personal profit, $4.2 million before taxes. Enough to ruin lives. The SEC charged Marcus with securities fraud in February. Dennis Howell, facing his own charges, flipped, turned state's evidence, testified about every meeting, every decision, every elegant lie they'd crafted together. He did it via video link from Singapore, where he'd been living in what his lawyer described as self-imposed exile. His testimony was devastating, calm, detailed. The testimony of a man who decided that saving himself meant destroying someone else. That's what cooperation agreements do. They turn partners into witnesses, loyalty into leverage. Marcus fought, hired the best lawyers money could buy. Sullivan and Cromwell, the kind of white shoe firm that charges $1,500 an hour and earns every penny. Built a defense around complexity and plausible deniability, and the idea that he'd trusted the wrong people. that he'd relied on his CFO's expertise, that the general counsel had signed off, that he was a visionary CEO focused on strategy, not accounting minutia. But juries don't like that defense. Not when the emails are clear, not when the CFO testifies, not when the general counsel produces recordings of conversations she'd started making after that first meeting in Marcus's office. Recordings I'd given to the SEC. Recordings I'd made because Richard Walsh told me to. Because evidence isn't just what you know, it's what you can prove. Because memory fades and stories shift, and the only thing that matters in a courtroom is what you can put on a screen and play for 12 people who took time off work to decide what justice looks like. In April, Marcus took a plea, 10 years reduced to 6 with cooperation, fines, disgorgement of bonuses, lifetime ban from serving as an officer or director of a public company. The systematic dismantling of everything he'd built. His lawyer released a statement. I read it twice, looking for remorse, for acknowledgement, for any hint that he understood what he'd done. It talked about errors in judgment and aggressive interpretations of accounting standards and deep regret for the impact on stakeholders. It never once used the word fraud. It never once said, I'm sorry. I watched it on the news. Sat in my new apartment, smaller, cheaper, on the 23rd floor instead of the 42nd, and watched him walk into the courthouse in a gray suit, no longer smiling. The reporters shouted questions. He ignored them. His lawyer gave a brief statement on the courthouse steps. Something about maintaining innocence despite the plea agreement, about choosing resolution over prolonged litigation, about moving forward, as if 6 years in federal prison was just another chapter, another challenge to overcome, another story to tell at cocktail parties he'd never be invited to again. I turned off the television, sat in silence. My apartment was quiet in a way the old one never was. No sirens filtering up from 42 floors below. No sense of being above the city, separate from it. Here, I could hear my neighbors, a baby crying, someone playing piano, the ordinary sounds of ordinary lives. I'd bought cheaper furniture, IKEA instead of design within reach, prints from street vendors instead of gallery pieces. My daughter said it felt cozier, more like a home and less like a hotel. She was right. But I missed the view sometimes, missed the illusion of height, the feeling that I'd climbed high enough to be safe. Apex Dynamics survived, barely. The stock dropped 40% before stabilizing. Pension funds filed class action lawsuits. The business press wrote think pieces about corporate governance and tone at the top, and whether boards actually provide oversight or just collect fees. Half the executive team resigned. The good ones first. The VP of operations who'd built the supply chain from scratch, the head of product who'd developed our 3 most successful offerings. They saw the ship taking on water and swam for shore while they still could. The mediocre ones stayed, the ones who needed the title more than they needed their dignity, who could convince themselves that Marcus had been an aberration, that the culture was fundamentally sound, that they bore no responsibility for what had happened under their noses. Robert Sutherland became interim CEO, spent 6 months selling off pieces. The Delaware subsidiary went for $47 million to a private equity firm that promised to unlock value, which meant firing half the staff and extracting cash before flipping it again. The European operations, the Latin American distribution network, everything that could be monetized was monetized. Survival through amputation. They offered me the permanent GC role, better title, more money, a seat on the executive committee. The offer came in writing, hand-delivered to my apartment by Robert himself. He brought coffee from that place in Tribeca. Remembered how I liked it. Sat in my smaller living room with its cheaper furniture and its view of other buildings instead of the sky. The board believes in you, he said. We want someone with integrity in that role. Someone who proved they'll do the right thing even when it costs them. It cost everyone, I said. I said no. Because here's what they don't tell you about whistleblowing, about choosing truth over convenience, about standing up when it would be so much easier to sit down. You win, technically. You're protected by law, rewarded by the SEC, 12% of collected sanctions, which in my case meant a check for $3.4 million. But you lose something too, your reputation in certain circles, your comfort with ambiguity, your ability to walk into a boardroom and believe that anyone's telling you the whole truth, your innocence maybe, the part of you that wanted to believe people were fundamentally decent, that corporations were communities, not just engines of profit, that your signature on a document meant something beyond legal liability. I left Apex in June, took 6 months off, spent time with my daughter, taught her how to ride a bike without training wheels, went to every recital, every parent-teacher conference, Every moment I'd missed while billing hours and attending board meetings and pretending I was building something that mattered. In December, I opened my own practice, small, boutique. I represent whistleblowers now. People who find themselves in impossible positions, holding evidence of fraud, trying to decide whether truth is worth the cost. I tell them it is, but I tell them honestly what the cost looks like. The other night, my daughter asked me about what happened. She's 10 now, old enough to understand the basics, old enough to have heard things at school, seen the news coverage, wondered why we moved to a smaller apartment. "Mommy made some people angry," I said. "Because you told the truth?" "Because I told the truth." She thought about that. Serious. My daughter is serious in ways I wasn't at her age. She thinks hard before speaking, weighs her words. Was it worth it? And here's the thing. Here's what I've learned in the 18 months since I walked into that board meeting with my presentation and my evidence and my willingness to burn it all down. It's not a simple question. I lost my career trajectory, lost friends who worked at Apex, who blamed me for the crash in stock price, for the layoffs that followed, for the chaos of reorganization. Lost the version of myself who believed that playing by the rules meant you'd be protected. But I kept my law license, kept my dignity, kept the ability to look at myself in the mirror without flinching, and I kept the sculpture my daughter made. It sits on my new desk now, in my small office in Brooklyn, still crooked, still imperfect, still there. "Yes," I told her, "it was worth it." She smiled, hugged me, went back to her homework, and I sat there in our apartment, smaller but ours, cheaper but paid for, with money I'd earned honestly, and thought about Marcus Chen. He's in minimum security in Pennsylvania, writes letters to the Wall Street Journal about overreach and prosecutorial excess, has a blog that 50 people read, still believes he was right, that he was just doing business, that he was punished for being successful. Maybe he believes it. Maybe it helps him sleep at night. Maybe that's what men like him need to tell themselves to survive. I sleep fine now, better than I did when I was general counsel, better than I did when I was billing by the hour and measuring success in partnership tracks and stock options and corner offices I couldn't afford to walk away from. Last week, a woman called my office, junior counsel at a pharmaceutical company, found irregularities in a clinical trial. Her boss told her to bury them. She's scared, desperate, asking if it's worth it. I meet her tomorrow at a cafe in Brooklyn, somewhere quiet where we can talk honestly about choices and consequences and the price of refusing to look away. I'll tell her what I tell everyone. That truth is expensive. That courage costs more than you think it will. That the system protects institutions first and people second and whistleblowers last. But I'll also tell her this. You have to be able to live with yourself. You have to be able to look at your daughter or your son or your own reflection and know that when it mattered, you chose truth over comfort, justice over convenience, the hard right over the easy wrong, because in the end, that's all we really own. Not the titles, not the corner offices, not the stock options or the retirement plans or the carefully crafted LinkedIn profiles. Just our choices and what they say about who we are. The city lights are coming on outside my window. 23 floors below, people are finishing work, heading home, living their complicated lives. Somewhere in that sprawl, Marcus Chen's replacement is sitting in an office, making decisions, choosing what matters. I hope he chooses better, but I don't count on it. I've learned something in the past 18 months, something I wish I'd known when I was 30, when I was taking that job at Apex and believing that success meant climbing high enough to be safe. You're never safe. Not really. Not at the top of the tower, not at the bottom, not anywhere in between. But you can be true. You can be honest. You can be the person your daughter believes you are when she looks at you and asks if it was worth it. And when the question comes, and it always comes in some form to all of us, you can answer yes, even if your voice shakes, even if you're broke and scared and uncertain about what comes next. Even if the sculpture on your desk is crooked and you've never had time to fix it, you can answer yes, and mean it. The phone rings. My next client, another impossible choice, another person trying to decide if a truth is worth the price. I answer it, because this is what I do now. This is who I am, not the general counsel in the corner office, not the lawyer who apologized. Just Sarah, someone who learned the hard way, that some lies are too expensive to live with, and some truths are worth everything. Outside, the city glows, indifferent, beautiful, dangerous. Inside, I smile, because I'm still here, still standing, still true. And that, in the end, is enough.